I purposely do not put in dark things into my work because there's enough darkness, I think, in the world that I think that people need to laugh, and hopefully through their laughter they can kind of see what I'm saying, as opposed to, I think even if people are doing kind of pieces that are not, quote, realistic, and they're making them dark, so much darkness in the world, it just seems to me that I want to throw a little light on that. I feel more comfortable calling myself a post-funk artist. When I entered Davis, and it was 1977, and people were working all day and all night, every day and night of the week, and we were all there just working and working and working. And I probably made, I don't know, about 30 figures in one year. Just exploring as much as I possibly could about clay and glaze. And, that was another thing about Arneson. He really concentrated us on the ideas than the techniques. So we had to find our own techniques. Arneson would assign us, instead of, okay, go ahead and throw 20 pots, like a normal ceramic instructor would, he would say, okay, you're going to make a sculpture. He would be saying this whole class. You're going to make a sculpture about, war or crime or love or concepts, as opposed to, we're going to build a slab pot, or we're going to build a box, or we're going to build a life-size figure, for that matter. I mean, it was not really about the technical aspect, because he knew that we could learn that from each other, as opposed to, that let's delve into what it means to make art and what you want to say. Well, I think the thing that really drew me towards funk art was the idea that you didn't have to be making things realistic, smooth, making them look exactly like what they were supposed to be. And also, the whole funk thing was leave your print, leave your handprint, your brush stroke. Don't hide anything. Don't hide any of your techniques. In fact, they didn't really have a lot of techniques. It was kind of just pure energy. The abstract expressionists were like that too, I think. That it was like, this is my mark. But the funk artist kind of attached, an object to it, or a person, or, as a subject. And that really, I just liked the rawness of it. I liked how it, and the humor, and I for some reason I just love humor, and I wonder if it isn't, I think back my childhood. My parents used to, they're kind of intellectuals, and they were really interested in heavy, deep movies. They would drag me to, go see The Seventh Seal and all the Ingmar Bergman movies, and any kind of desperately depressing movie they can find, because suffering is depth for some reason. I don't know why, but it is. I use sarcasm in my work a lot. An example is the piece that the Crocker has. There's a portrait of our friend who, she acts very sweet, and she's not really that sweet. And so what I did is I made her with a big softy ice cream hairdo. I have angels all over her, and her clothing kind of looks like they're made of candy. And she's not that way. And everybody knows she's not that way, but I portrayed her in this kind of innocent, angelic manner. So that's sort of a sarcastic jab at her or people like her. I mean, you know, she's a friend of ours and she can take the joke, but still, I had to do it. I started doing nostalgic figures because I wanted to make sculptures that I would have in my own home. Prior to that, I would make sculptures that were just, I would just make them and they would just sort of be expressions of my thoughts. And I wouldn't necessarily want to live with them every day because, you know, prior to these big-headed sculptures there, I was actually sort of making some dark pieces. They were kind of humorous too, but they were usually a lot of sculptures were angry and yelling, and you know, I was just taking my frustrations out on you know, about my life with the sculptures. So I didn't particularly want to live with them. So I started doing these big-headed sculptures and doing nostalgic pieces, thinking that if I didn't sell them, I'd like to have this in my house and look at it every day. So I mean, luckily I sold a lot of them, so I didn't have to have them in my house. But so that's sort of where that comes from. I was just thinking, who do I love? You know, I mean, who do I? You know, the Pink Panther movie, the first one. For some reason, it has just such a warm place in my heart to do that, and so that was nostalgic. So I made Inspector Clouseau, and you know, I did Cary Grant, and you know, he's just suave and, you know, seemed like a nice guy. Wouldn't mind having him around just to pal around with. So made a sculpture of him. Well, color has always been something that I've thought about. Obviously, in my work, there's a lot of bright colors. I'm always mystified about people's interpretation of color, and they're almost, most people are almost afraid of color, and I don't understand where it's all coming from, because I see, you know, and this goes back to the dark and the light kind of thing. I see color as life, flowers, butterflies, you know, it's life. And I see brown, gray, subtle colors as death. I mean, it's just my little, I mean, talking about my own reality, but it's just the way I see things. And I'd rather be alive than dead, just because I'm having a good time, and I don't, you know, I don't want it to end. Okay.
Mischief is entertainment. It's harmless entertainment, and it's fun. It's like poking somebody in the eye. It's like jumping off the pedestal and frightening somebody. So there's some kinds of mischief that I might have done 20 years ago that I wouldn't do anymore. In fact, finding a skeleton of a humanoid in a city park probably wouldn't be such a good idea right now. It was a good idea when we found it in Chico 20 years ago. But now I'm afraid some of this mischief might result in spending a day in jail or more. So it's a touchy subject. Humor is a therapeutic thing. It's good for you. Doctors tell you that it's good for you. People like it. it makes it fun to work if you can be thinking about jokes and laughter, and it allows you to talk about things that maybe you couldn't talk about if you were serious. So to me, if I get an idea that makes me laugh, I think I have a good idea. And I think the best of my work has some sort of a twist in it that makes you wonder if your mind was bent, or makes you wonder, what is this? Is this real or not? I wonder what this is supposed to mean. I think those are the kind of questions that are interesting to put into a person's mind, and to make them laugh too if you can. Well, they tell me that funk sprang out of the more rural areas like Davis or Wisconsin or Kentucky, which maybe is true. I know that I remember Bill Wiley, who's one of the artists from UC Davis, or there was Bill Wiley and Roy DeForest and Bob Arneson and Manuel Neary are all considered funk artists, and they were all on the faculty at UC Davis in the 60s. And I remember Wiley saying that the reason that he did what he did was nobody was interested in it anyway, and he could do whatever he wanted to. And I think there's some truth to that. You know, in my own case, living in Wisconsin, really nobody was interested in what I was doing except my students and we pretty much did whatever we felt like doing to entertain ourselves and each other. And there's kind of innate kind of country sense of humor, maybe. At least in Wisconsin, you know, you have the humor about deer hunting and mosquitoes that carry you off to feed their children and so on. And it just seems like kind of a natural expression is to want to be funny and make things up and not worry so much about formal things and about the art world itself. My parents always wanted me to become a doctor, and that's kind of like I eased off into becoming just a pharmacist as I went to school. But I like the idea of posing as a doctor, and you know, presenting tableaus in ceramic, showing the awful things, you know, and the weird things, like in a comic book that you would portray in a mad doctor's laboratory where they're trying to create life out of mud, or they're trying to do all the things that we're doing nowadays, biological engineering, only to do it in a way, you know, with a sense of humor and sense of horror, and the idea that maybe this whole thing is going to turn against you. You're the mad doctor, you're about to be destroyed by your experiment. anybody can make a perfect pot, but I'm experimenting with trying to make imperfect ones that have a little story hidden in them. I studied pottery, you know, and you usually try to learn how to make good pots. But then after you make a bunch of good pots, and you know, if you look around my yard, you'll see thrown pots that'll hold 30 gallons or 50 gallons, and then I thought, well, it'd be interesting to see what you can do to make imperfect pots. And that's kind of what led to the clinker pots, is I really liked some of the old jugs that I would find that would have a bloat or a bubble coming out of the side. And so I started experimenting with what you could put into the clay that would make that happen. And I've got a whole chamber of horrors of kind of pots that went bad because they bloated, they cracked, they melted. And so it's like the pot telling a story about its trip through the process. This is where we found Bigfoot, out here on the hill.
This is the world-famous Dr. Gladstone and his Wonders of the World Museum at his compound in Northern California. Let's take a look.
Well, I guess you were wondering why I brought you here. I wanted to show you the Bigfoot skeleton. I dug this up about 20, 30 years ago. It's been shown all over the country, up and down from Alaska to San Diego. Skeleton of what we know as Giganticus erectus robustus. The dropping, the bones. Proof that P.T. Barnum was right. Actually, I discovered these again almost every time I come out here. Pretty nifty, huh? It's the only Bigfoot skeleton I've ever seen. See, there's a normal human penal bone compared with the Bigfoot triple jointed penal bone. This is where Bigfoot got his scientific name, was from the studying of this bone, which we've determined is capable of making a U-turn. Therefore, one of nature's birth control methods, and well suited for athletic mating habits. So we call it Giganticus erectus robustus. The idea of having a museum of wonders came about after I had promoted the big discovery of the Bigfoot and decided that maybe I should have a collection of mythological animals. And that included things like cyclops, mythical giants, sea serpents, and even a almost unknown, well, jackalopes, hodags, you know, maybe even obscure specimens that you would read about, but nobody had actually ever collected or proved it existed. So that was my idea, to prove the existence of mythological animals by having specimens. Then after I had done that for a while, then I started having people coming to the front door to see the museum that had heard about it. And that kind of forced me into doing something in the yard and, you know, actually make this a reality. And so over the last 40 years that we've lived here, little by little, we've tried to create, you know, kind of like a garden museum of the wonders of the world. Actually, we found these twin cyclopses here. An interesting little genetic problem here. Instead of 2 eyes, it has 2 noses. A lot of people don't know that about cyclopses. I'm glad you're duly impressed. So we call the Cyclops the Paleolithic giant of the pre-credulous era. That's the period when people would believe almost anything. Pre-credulous. I like the robot building. It's a whole different way of working than ceramics. You know, when you work with clay, you've got this box or pile of amorphous material. You start from scratch and you figure out what to do with it. And of course, with the potter's wheel, you make these round and cylindrical shapes. And the first robots that I actually made at all were made with the potter's wheel, and they were made to go in the science section of the museum, kind of like the controller of the Mad Doctor displays. But I decided that making robots out of ceramics was too difficult. They were too heavy and hard to do compared with if I just went out and bought a bunch of spun aluminum dishes. They were just like the pots, but they were lighter and they were easier to work with, and you could make a life-size robot out of aluminum, and it only weighed 25 pounds. Also, I would be presented with a lot of forms that I maybe wouldn't have thought of if I was just sitting down and making shapes. I'd be presented with complicated shapes that came off of cars or airplanes or home appliances. When I'm making a robot sculpture, I'm trying to make a person, a personality, a character, and I don't really know what I'm after when I start, but it's one of those things that's kind of hard to put your finger on. But when I get things right, if I get the bulging eyes big enough, if I get the teeth long enough, or the mouth open enough, or the hands grasping enough, then I know that I'm done with it. And I just keep working on them until each one has that personality that I think, hey, that's good, that's okay. But I like the idea of claiming that old pots and pans have a soul in their past lives. So there you have it, believe it or not. I've been asked, what's the difference between the ridiculous and the sublime in art? And I don't have the foggiest idea of what that could mean. I think the ridiculous sounds pretty good. I'd like to see some ridiculous things. And maybe if they were really ridiculous, they could be sublime.